first time that the Philadelphia Eagles are speaking for the 2018 season as defending Super Bowl champions. John McMullen was there at the NovaCare Complex today, and he joins us now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. John, what's happening?
Hey, guys, what's happening? It's a new norm here, if you haven't heard.
The new norm. Super Bowl champions, that's the way it goes, and a lot of people speaking today. But first and foremost, on the top of that list, Carson Wentz speaking as a as he's back there and getting ready for the 2018 season. But obviously this preparation a lot different than the preparation he had last year. But he still maintains, as you write at 97.3 ESPN.com, John, week one remains the goal.
Yeah, they've kind of avoided timetables. They continue to do that, both Carson and the Eagles. They will not put any timetables on his rehab from the torn ACL and the torn LCL, but they've been very consistent. Week one has been the goal. Carson has said consistently he believes he will be ready for week one, which is September 6th. The schedule will come out later this week. It's likely going to be a rematch of the NFC Championship game with the Vikings. Doug Peterson has continuously said he expects him to be there week one, but not much before that. Carson kind of confirmed today that he will not need preseason work to be ready, and I would be stunned if he got any preseason work as far as being in the actual preseason games. Obviously, he'll be throwing the football and things of that nature in practice, but I don't think you're going to see him until the real bullets start flying, and then I think you will see.
That's a pretty tough proposition to go out to say. I mean, how much could he actually do in training camp, if he's not ready or prepared to play in any games?
Well, I think it tells you how little people believe in those preseason games now, and to a certain degree, I think practice in the coach's mind is more important. But the reality is, when you're talking about star players, and that's what Carson is, they don't need a lot of work. They really don't. And that's where you get some of the frustration with veteran players. And we'll talk about it as things advance, no doubt, this offseason. And guys in the past like Darren Foles and Donnie Jones and Jason Peters that have stayed away from OTAs, doesn't really matter. It's never affected them. And, you never want to say this kind of stuff is very, very important for young players and developmental players. But for veteran guys and superstars, it's not that important.
John, one of the concerns is that Carson Wentz, we've already seen videos and things out. Is he being too aggressive in his return? Was he asked about that, trying to come back too soon today?
Yeah, you have to be very careful, and I think that's an inexact science, and he mentioned that, and he mentioned some of the horror stories of guys trying to push back too soon. But I think if you do look at the timetable of doctors, again, the Eagles will avoid it. Carson will avoid talking about numbers. But doctors freely talk about it. And this type of injury usually takes about 9 months. And he was injured on December 10th, had surgery on December 13th. So 9 months would be September 10th, September 13th. Opening day for the Eagles is on a Thursday night. That would be, I believe, September 6th. So he would be about a week early, if anything, from that timetable. And for a guy with the work ethic of Carson Wentz, that really isn't going to be pushing it, I don't think. And I think the Eagles will be very careful. And if there is any question that he's not ready, which I can't imagine, they won't clear him. But I firmly believe, and I've said it early in this process, just because I know how hard he works, I know he's going to do everything to be ready. I know he's going to do everything asked of him in the rehab process. So I think he's going to be there week one.
We saw little blurbs of him on the sidelines at the Super Bowl, but that had to be frustrating for him to watch somebody else up on the podium. What did he talk about the Super Bowl and watching not himself up there with the Lombardi Trophy, but Nick Foles?
Yeah, I think there's a little human nature, and he's admitted it. And so did the other injured player. Jordan Hicks spoke today as well. There's a little bit of disappointment from a personal standpoint because you're not allowed to share in the joy of that win with your teammates. But somebody also asked Carson the question, do you consider this going for your first Super Bowl ring or your second Super Bowl ring? And Carson said, we won the Super Bowl.
Right.
And I've compared it to Carson pitched the 8-inning shutout, and Nick Foles was Mariano Rivera, came in and closed it. Carson was a huge part of this team winning the Super Bowl. And I firmly believe if they didn't have home field advantage, they're not beating Atlanta or Minnesota and even getting to New England.
John, where is he now? Is he running? Is he doing stuff? I mean, is he ahead of schedule? Is he able to do things that, that would at least make us feel like starting the season off is a realistic goal?
Yeah, I mean, the best way I just describe it is if you saw him walking up the stairs there at the media house at the NovaCare Complex, you wouldn't know it's a guy rehabbing. He looks completely fine as far as normal everyday things go. He looks like a completely healthy young athlete. Obviously, he's not there as far as his rehab, but it's progressing nicely. If you look at where he was originally, you remember he was on the crutches, then the cane. Now he's got nothing. Obviously, he's a brace. You've seen on Instagram, he's posted some videos over the past number of weeks, show him throwing the football. He looks bigger. He looks stronger. It's pretty evident he's been working on his upper body as he was rehabbing his lower body. He looks like a bigger guy, and that would, if anything, when we saw Carson for the first time, it's pretty amazing how big he is, but you could see there was plenty of room for him to add muscle to his frame, and I think he's done that. So it's going to be interesting to see him come back. I think the most important aspect we got from Carson today is that question we've been talking about since basically he arrived here day one. Is he going to learn from this? Is he going to stop sort of his reckless style? And his answer, as it has been consistently, is he's not going to change the way he plays. So we'll see how that kind of shakes out.
And not only that, how about his relationship with Nick Foles? Did he indicate that changed over time in terms of for the better? Where they I'm always interested to find out about the starting quarterback's relationship with the backup quarterback, and then when they flip-flop positions. And this one, when the starting quarterback, who's clearly the star of the team, is injured, and the backup kind of takes over the town.
Yeah, I think everybody knows. As I said, a lot of that comes from outside the walls here. No one in this organization, including Nick Foles, has ever even intimated that this is anything other than Carson Wentz's team, because everybody knows how good he is. We've talked about the emotional aspect of winning the Super Bowl a lot, and the fact that Nick Foles was the guy on the field getting this organization its first Lombardi trophy. So I get that, but everybody here in this organization knows who the star quarterback is, and that's Carson Wentz. And that's not a shot at Nick Foles. What Nick Foles is a very good backup. He's probably an average starter in this league. But he's not Carson Wentz, and everybody knows that, and Nick knows it. So their relationship really hasn't changed. They're both very religious guys. They both lean on their faith. Zach Ertz, in fact, talked today. He said neither of them have an ego, and he said especially Nick. Nick does not have an ego. So there's no even whiff of a quarterback controversy in Philadelphia.
Now, John, I know that Carson talked about a new quarterback coach, a new offensive coordinator. Does it seem like that might be an issue for him trying to get up to speed quicker?
I don't know. It's gonna be interesting. I think that's one of those things to keep an eye on because I think Frank Reich and John DeFilippo were really good at their jobs. So I think when we talk about Super Bowl attrition all the time, that to me is the biggest attrition, not some of the players they lost. They lost two really, really good offensive coaches. And they were the two offensive coaches that worked with Carson Wentz and Nick Foles on a daily basis. John as the position coach and Frank obviously as the coordinator. That's going to be difficult to replace. And Mike Groh has been elevated to offensive coordinator. Press Taylor was the assistant quarterbacks coach. Is going to be the quarterbacks coach. To be honest, they're probably not going to be as good, at least early on, as the guys they're being asked to replace. That's just part of winning the Super Bowl.
Did Carson give any thoughts on some of the roster moves, especially like Wallace, Richard Rodgers, losing Torrey Smith, like Aaron Blunt? Any of those thoughts come out from Carson Wentz today?
Yeah, I mean, remember, they haven't gotten on the field yet. This is just conditioning, and for Carson, it's just rehab. So obviously, we'll get into that more, but you can just project in the fact that obviously Mike Wallace gives them tremendous deep speed. Richard Rodgers. One of the questions I asked Carson, because if you go back to when Jordan Matthews was traded, I think that kind of hit him in the mouth a little bit because he was so close to him. They were personal friends off the field, very, very close, and I think that trade hurt him. And he was also very close to Trey Burton off the field. And obviously, Trey left in free agency, had to. As a young father with 3 children, he got a big deal in Chicago. Just couldn't afford to stay here. Had to do the right things for his family. And I think he's now in his 3rd year, and he kind of realizes that's what the NFL is. That's what it's going to be moving forward. You're going to lose some close friends, and he said that's what the offseason is for. You can get together then, and I think he's sort of turned that corner because I think if you go back to that Matthews trade, he was hurt by that, and I think now he kind of understands a little bit more what the NFL is.
Crazy to think that he's already going into his 3rd season, Carson Wentz. John McMullen is with us here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline as Carson Wentz, among others, spoke today at the NovaCare Complex. Now, he did say himself that he doesn't think he needs to play in the preseason, right? I mean, he's kind of on board with, I don't need any preseason games.
Yeah. And I by the way, if you asked every veteran player, every star player in this league, they would say the same thing. They just do not need to play in the preseason, and to be honest, the vast majority would prefer not to play in the preseason. It's just not that valuable to them. So I've talked about it a lot. When you forget about a major injury like Carson is coming off of, but the trend in this league is even if you have a minor injury, whether it's a bulky ankle or a tweaked hamstring or something where you would 100% be playing in the regular season, they're going to hold you out of preseason games. That's the way this league is going. And as I said, Carson doesn't believe he needs it, and he's not alone. I think if you ask every starting quarterback in this league if they need preseason work, they probably tell you, not really.
Well, and one of the guys who spoke today was Malcolm Jenkins, and he said that he was kind of confident that Doug will make sure that he's aware of not putting in a lot of extra work based on the fact that they had to play another month of football.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the underrated things of making a deep run in the playoffs and going to the Super Bowl, winning it in the Eagles' case. It's something the Patriots have been dealing with for years and years and years. You don't have much of an off season. You play in the Super Bowl, and here we are. It seems like yesterday we were in Minneapolis, and I think it's just as cold in Philadelphia today. I wish the weather would turn, but we're right back at it, going again into the next season. And for veteran players, guys like Malcolm, who play a ton of reps and a ton of snaps, yeah, you have to be cautious with them, especially in the off-season work, where, as I said, they probably don't need much work. So this is the time where you look at the younger players on your roster and try to get them up to speed from a developmental standpoint.
John, Malcolm Jenkins also admitted that losing Patrick Robinson will be tough.
Yeah, it really will. I don't think – I've written about it a lot. I don't think people realize how good he was last season as this team's slot cornerback, arguably the best slot corner in football. And from a personal level, Malcolm is very close friends with him, and he was the one who kind of recruited him here on a one-year prove-it deal. So he knows better than most what they're losing with Patrick Robinson, and that's going to be one of those stories we're going to be talking about all year probably, because it's very unlikely, no matter how this shakes out, whether the Eagles move Jalen Mills inside, which I think would be the early plan, start him on the outside, then move him to the inside when you go into nickel and put Sidney Jones out there. However it shakes out, I just don't think they're going to get the same level of play they got from Patrick Robinson last season. It's almost impossible. That's how well he played.
Yeah,
he was the best slot cornerback in football.
No, Malcolm said he's confident that they have the other corners on the roster right now, but they released Worley yesterday, so that you start looking into a situation where you said that they have the corners on the roster right now, but we've talked about this before. They don't really have the ideal slot guy. You might be moving a guy like Mills down who plays, better on the outside.
Yeah, and that's the issue. Now, sometimes you remember last season, the Eagles moved Patrick to the slot in a sort of a last-ditch effort. He was not playing well on the outside. They acquired Ronald Darby. And Jim Schwartz kind of said, okay, let's throw him in the slot and see how it works out. And sort of lightning struck, and it worked out. So you never know what's going to happen. They could draft somebody. They could bring in a veteran later in the process and catch lightning in a bottle again. But that kind of thing just doesn't seem to happen twice in a row. And we'll see. You're right in saying that all this team, if you look at the names, Jalen Mills, Ronald Darby, Sidney Jones, Rasul Douglas, it looks pretty good. But all four of those guys are outside cornerbacks. And slot corner is just a completely different position.
John, a couple other key guys spoke. One, Jordan Hicks, he's a guy that hasn't been able to stay on the field. And the fact that he is speaking today, obviously, they think highly of him. He was hurt, so they want to get him out there. But I think they view him as a key guy on that defense. They won the Super Bowl last year without him, and you can make an argument that some people thought he might have been the best player on that defense at times. Where is he with his rehab?
Yeah, I think the most amazing thing about the Eagles winning the Super Bowl, we always talk about they won the Super Bowl without their quarterback, but they really won the Super Bowl without both of their starting quarterbacks, and that Jordan Hicks is the quarterback of the defense, and he's the guy who is the conduit to Jim Schwartz and the guy who calls the signals and gets everybody lined up correctly. And you mentioned his injury really dates back to Texas. He's got this reputation as being an off-injured guy. In 2 of his 3 seasons were cut basically in half. He had the torn pec as a rookie, and he had the Achilles last season. But when he's on the field, he's among the most productive linebackers in football. That's why you're right. I mean, look at who spoke today. It wasn't, it wasn't
Cox.
fringe players.
Right.
Yeah. It was Carson Wentz. It was Zach Ertz. It was Malcolm Jenkins. It was Jordan Hicks. So, yeah, they think a lot and very highly about Jordan Hicks. He's a starting middle linebacker on this team. He's a 3-down linebacker. The only question with Jordan Hicks is, can he stay healthy?
Yeah.
He got hurt in week 7, so he's going to be fine. He's another guy. He looks completely healthy right now. Obviously, he's not. They're going to be very cautious. There's no doubt he's going to be ready for the regular season. But it's his contract year. Last year was rookie deal, and he's got to find a way to stay healthy.
Zach Ertz, also one of the guys talking today, John, and I know that he was asked about Brent Selleck no longer being around. Had some positive words
and
for
Trey Burton.
What Brent Selleck meant to him.
Yeah, he did, and he kind of joked because he's all of a sudden in Brent Selleck's role, who was the longest tenured Philadelphia athlete in any sport. He'd been here for 11 years and was a leader on this team, obviously the leader against the tight end group, of the tight end group. And, Zach kind of laughed, and Richard Rodgers signed and came in, and he called Zach a veteran, and he said, dude, I'm 1 year older than you. And some of the rookie tight ends start talking about rookies always get asked who they sort of model their games after, and it seems like all the tight ends say Zach Ertz or Travis Kelce, all the young tight ends, and he laughed about that. And his role is changing, and he's now Brent Selleck. He's now in charge of that tight end room. He's always been a very productive player, but now he's taken on a bit of a different role as a leader. And he's always been a quiet, understated guy. He had sort of a speech impediment he mentioned when he was younger. So he's not always been the most confident guy when it comes to speaking, but he's gotten better and better. And he's definitely taken on a different role this season.
So much NFL news that we will touch on throughout the week. Of course, the draft is coming up. John McMullen, more on the NFL at 97.3 ESPN.com. And we didn't even get into a story. He's got a really good piece on the Eagles and their decision to cut Worley. Check that out right now, and how it kind of sets a little bit of a tone, a little bit of a precedence there. Check it out at 97.3 ESPN.com. We've also got NFL news on Des Bryant, where he might want to play. Aaron Rodgers might not be happy. Earl Thomas not showing up. So there's some big names in the NFL news and notes. John McMullen at JF McMullen on Twitter. He appeared via the Boardwalk on the Hotline. John, you the man.
All right, thanks, guys.